Continuing with this training series, today we will learn how to taxi and take off from an airbase with the AJS37 Viggen. The aircraft has already been cold started and is ready to taxi. The mission consists of taxi to runway, before takeoff checks, takeoff, fly to the first waypoint, B1. This mission is based on the procedures described on the DCS AJS37 Flight Manual version 2.1. This training series is set on the Kola map, and the approximate mission time is 15 minutes. By default, the pilot's body is shown. You can use left shift plus P to hide it if you prefer. When a voiceover tells you to interact with a cockpit element, wait until the voiceover has finished, before performing the interaction. If you are repeating the mission, note that most voiceovers can be skipped just by pressing the spacebar. Press spacebar to begin. We will first contact air traffic control to request taxi clearance. The Viggen's FR22 primary radio is already tuned to the ATC frequency. Press the key or button that you have binded to the FR22 push-to-talk. The DCS communications menu should appear. Select F1, request taxi to runway. Press spacebar once ATC gives you clearance. Good, note that ATC assigned runway 21 to our flight. You need to be careful to taxi towards the correct runway end, as this airbase has no taxi up to the runway extremes, so you will need to taxi over the main runway, and then do a U-turn at the runway end. On the briefing we have an airbase diagram, with the taxi route drawn in orange. Press spacebar to continue. Parking brake, release. Briefly press the brake pedals, to release the parking brake handle. Okay, we are now ready to taxi. On the Viggen, the rudder pedals are used to steer the nose wheel, which has a maximum turn of 30 degrees. You can add differential braking if you need a tighter turn. Gradually increase throttle above ground idle. Note that the exhaust nozzle closes. At around 70 to 75% RPM, the aircraft will begin to roll forward. Check brakes by fully pressing both toe brakes simultaneously. Good, release the toe brakes and let the aircraft roll again. Turn left by pushing left rudder to enter taxiway Bravo. Turn left again to enter taxiway Yankee. Good, you are now on taxiway Yankee. Proceed forward, towards taxiway Alpha. Do not taxi at high speed. We are near taxiway Alpha, turn right, towards the runway. Okay, now bring the aircraft to a halt, just prior to the yellow dashed line in front of you. We will now contact ATC again, to request takeoff clearance. Press the key or button that you have binded to the push-to-talk button of the FR22 radio. The DCS communications menu should appear. Select F1, request takeoff. Press spacebar once ATC gives you clearance. Okay, now that you have clearance, look left and right to ensure there is no other traffic, release the brakes, and enter the runway. If ATC tells you unable to clear takeoff, ignore it as it is a long-standing DCS bug. To reach the start of runway 21, we are now using it as a taxiway. When you reach its end, you will employ the left ramp to exit the runway and do a U-turn to position yourself at its start. On DCS, the ATC can't handle taxiing on runways, so please ignore any message that ATC may give from now on. You are near the start of runway 21, take the left ramp to exit the runway, use the ramp yellow line as a guide. Good, now do a right turn onto the runway, remember to use right wheel brake for a tighter turn.
Springfield 1-1, clear to taxi to runway 21.
Align with the center line of the runway. Once aligned, press the wheel brakes and bring the aircraft to a complete halt. Good, we will now proceed with the rest of the before takeoff procedure. Main and backup heading indicators, main and backup altimeters. Check. First, compare the headings of the ADI with the one of the central indicator and the one of the backup course indicator. They should match and be around 214 degrees. Note that the Viggen computer is able to apply a magnetic declination heading correction, so these three instruments are now displaying true headings rather than magnetic ones. Press spacebar to continue. Next, compare the two altimeters. They should match and be very near QFE altitude. Press spacebar to continue. Master mode selector, set to nav. This should be done no more than 2 minutes before takeoff, to avoid excessive temperature rise on the avionics bay. The HUD is now active, adjust its brightness with the highlighted knob. Press spacebar to continue. Enable the radar by setting its mode switch to its A1 or A2 position, its screen will illuminate. Use the highlighted knob to reduce the radar screen brightness and make it easier to see. The radar will start working once the aircraft is on the air. Press spacebar to continue. Runway heading, check. The Viggen does not have an INS or GPS for navigation, instead it relies on a system based on the principle of automatic dead reckoning, ADR, where the pilot inputs the origin point for navigation, the takeoff position, and thereafter the aircraft senses any changes in course, speed and attitude, updating its current position every 103 milliseconds. The drift due to wind is compensated by either manually entering forecasted wind values, or with aircraft movements detected by the Doppler unit. For this ADR system to work, it requires a known initial point and heading. On the Viggen's navigation system, our current LS waypoint corresponds to our starting airbase, and with that information the computer knows both our initial position and the heading of its main runways. We can check our current runway heading by turning the computer data selector to its Bonnegrand's position, used for managing runway headings, TILS channels, and boundary lines for waypoints, and the INUT switch set to UT output. Do it now. The 6-digit display shows 2 items. Its leading 4 digits is the runway's true heading, not magnetic, while its last 2 digits is the TILS channel used by this airbase for instruments landing. We can see that the Viggen's computer knows that this runway has a true heading of 214.2 degrees, which is correct for runway 21. As a runway usually has 2 directions we can use, you can tell the computer to employ the opposite direction by clicking on the LS button. Let's check that direction, press LS now. The display now shows a heading of 34.2 degrees, which is the reciprocal of the previous direction, and we would accept that if we were to take off from runway 03. Press LS again to go back to the correct value. The display now shows 214.2 plus 05 for the TILS channel. Now the Viggen's navigation system has the correct initial position and heading needed for the ADR navigation. Finally, return the computer data selector knob to Act POS, which will display the aircraft's current position in longitude and latitude. Act POS is available only in output mode, UT, as it does not accept any input. On Act POS, the display shows the current longitude and latitude using the leading 4 digits, alternating both coordinates every 1 second. The fifth digit displays the status of the turn-nav system. If the status is 5, the turn-nav is making small corrections to the position keeping, increasing the navigation accuracy. However, turn-nav uses the radar altimeter, so it is able to work only at altitudes under 600 meters. The sixth digit shows the estimated error on the aircraft position, expressed in kilometers. Press spacebar to continue. SPAC, confirm it's on. SPAC is the main damping mode of the autopilot. It is engaged automatically and will continually damp movement in all 3 axes, in order to stabilize the aircraft. It should be engaged at all times during normal flight. Press spacebar to continue. Master warning and warning lights, check. Confirm that all warning lights are out, with the exception of the 3 green lights of the landing gear. Press spacebar to continue. HUD symbology, check that its information is correct. The Viggen is one of the earliest combat aircraft to employ a HUD to display information to the pilot, and as it is very different from those fitted to more modern aircrafts, we will describe its elements briefly. The HUD frame has a higher and a lower position, allowing the symbology to be visible both during normal flight, and also at high angles of attack such as during takeoff and landing. A lever on the left side of the HUD base toggles these 2 positions. Make sure the HUD is at its lower position, press spacebar to continue. For takeoff, the HUD adopts a different symbology than during normal flight. The flight path marker becomes an attitude indicator, to help maintain a correct attitude during rotation and initial climb. The heading scale, timeline, and attitude indicator are all moved down 10 degrees below the horizon, so that when you rotate the aircraft, and place the attitude indicator aligned with the horizon line, the aircraft will be on a 10 degrees pitch-up attitude. The pole lines that touch the horizon line represent 1, 2, and 3 degrees deviations on heading or pitch, such that if you place the attitude indicator aligned with the tallest pole, the aircraft would be on a 13 degrees pitch-up attitude. Press spacebar to continue. The highlight shows the current altitude. Source can be either barometric or radar altitude, depending on the HUD CISI switch. For this mission select RHM, radar. The altitude is always presented in 3 digits, between 0 to 990 meters the altitude is presented in increments of 10. Below 100 meters, the altitude is displayed in increments of 5 meters. During the takeoff run, the timeline will expand with increasing airspeed. When the extremes of the line touch the rotation marks, the aircraft has reached the correct rotation speed. At that point, pull very slightly on the flight stick and the aircraft will rotate and raise its nose. Be gentle, do not let the attitude indicator go over the tallest pole, or the tail of the aircraft can strike the ground. Press spacebar to continue. Takeoff pitch trim, check. To have an easier takeoff, set an initial pitch trim of 5 degrees nose up when flying with an external fuel tank, or 4 degrees if no fuel tank is fitted. Press spacebar to finish these pre-takeoff checks. We are now ready to take off. As things will happen rather quickly, let's briefly review the procedure beforehand. Please do not start until we have reviewed all steps. 1. Apply full wheel brakes. 2. Advance throttle to maximum military power, no afterburner. Check that EGT does not exceed 590 degrees Celsius plus ambient temperature. For this mission the limit is 611 degrees. 3. Release the brakes, steer the aircraft using gentle rudder pedals movement. 4. If needed, ignite afterburner. On longer runways, the Viggen is perfectly able to take off using just military power and a 10 degrees nose-up pitch. However, this is a short runway, so be sure to use at least Zone 2 afterburner. You can check the zone on the afterburner zone indicator, or on the exhaust nozzle gauge. 5. During the takeoff run, monitor the timeline on the HUD. 6. Rotate when the timeline reaches its end markers. Align the attitude indicator with the horizon line, if using just military power, or with the top of the outer poles if using afterburner. 7. Check the airspeed indicator. The Viggen should lift off at around 290 to 300 km per hour. 8. Retract the landing gear once airborne. This action also retracts the foreplane flaps, which may cause the aircraft to drop a bit, so avoid doing it too low, and make sure to be at least at 10 meters above the ground. 9. Climb with the initial 10 or 13 degrees attitude, until the HUD is out of the takeoff mode. You can notice the mode change, because the attitude indicator will be replaced by a flight path marker. The FPM looks like a small airplane, with a top fin, which actually functions like a time-on-target indicator, which we will use on a future training mission. 10. Elevate the HUD glass, to better display HUD symbology when at lower angles of attack. This step is the last on the procedure. Press spacebar to proceed with the takeoff. Okay, we will now proceed with the takeoff. 1. Apply full wheel brakes. 2. Advance throttle to maximum military power, check EGT. 3. Release brakes. 4. Use rudder pedals to steer. Advance throttle into afterburner. Monitor the timeline, rotate when it reaches its markers. Airborne. Retract landing gear. The HUD is now out of takeoff mode. Turn right towards the waypoint dot on the horizon line, to head to the B1 waypoint. Raise the HUD glass, do not exceed 500 meters altitude, to have maximum navigation precision. The jump of the HUD symbology was caused by the turnav system making a position fix. Steer the aircraft to head towards the dot on the horizon. To fulfill this training mission, you need to reach at least the first waypoint of our route, B1. Keep flying under 500 meters above ground level. The dot on the horizon line will guide you towards the waypoint. Use the trim hat to ease the force that you are applying to the flight stick. For example, if you are having to push on the stick to keep the aircraft level, then apply a bit of nose-down trim until you no longer have to push on the stick so much. If you are having to pull on the stick to keep level, then apply nose-up trim. Roll trim is only needed when you have an asymmetric weapon load. It's not needed on normal flight. When it's 60 seconds away from the B1 waypoint, a timeline will appear on the HUD. Good, you are now within 1 kilometer of the waypoint. The destination indicator should advance to be 2. Excellent. You have successfully completed this training mission, taxi, and take off from airbase. Press spacebar to exit from the mission.